Good morning to you all once again. I welcome you to Tabujula Patente channel, and before going further I would like to remind you to like and share the videos and subscribe to it too, and as it has more importance that will give us more motivation to carry on these lessons in guiding people that might be having language difficulties in forging ahead with this course that will usually prolong their journey of acquiring a license here. And I once again thank those that have already subscribed to the channel, and then most of them will be curious, asking questions. And thank you to you all, and we will be here with you until the end of this journey. Today our lesson will be Zona Traffico Limitato, that means traffic limited zone, and area pedonale and pedestrian areas. ZTL means zona traffico limitato ed area pedonale sono due cose ben diverse. It says traffic limited zones and pedestrian areas are two completely different things. La zona traffico limitato è un'area in cui l'accesso e la circolazione sono limitati ad ore o giorni prestabiliti o particolare categoria di utenti e di veicoli. It says a traffic limited zone is an area in which access of certain types of vehicle at certain hours or certain days predefined are not allowed. La zona traffico limitato è delimitata da appositi segnali stradali di inizio e fine. Traffic limited zones are identified with special signals, road signals, from the starting to the ending. Non è vero che è sempre vietata al transito dei veicoli a motore. It is not true that it is always forbidden for vehicles with machine engines to transit in those areas. That is not true. L'area pedonale, pedestrian areas, è una zona destinata al transito dei pedoni ed è delimitata da appositi segnali stradali di inizio e fine. Pedestrian areas are zones or areas that are designated, as the name suggests, pedestrians to transit in those areas, and they are usually identified with special road signal signboards that you will find from the starting to the ending. Oltre ai pedoni possono circolare, other than pedestrians, other uses that are allowed, that might be allowed. 1. Bicycles. If it is not identified, you could transit on them, but in some pedestrian areas you will find a bicycle, a symbol of a bicycle that will show you whether it is allowed or not. We will get to that point as we go on with the course. I veicoli al servizio di persone diversamente abili. Vehicles that are at service of people that are differently able are allowed to transit in pedestrian areas. Veicoli in servizio di emergenza, polizia, vigili del fuoco, autoambulanza, con sirene a luce lampeggiante blu in funzione. Vehicles that are in service of emergency, that could be police vehicles, firefighters, fire service vehicles, auto ambulances. These normally, as soon as or even before they will enter in these zones, these areas, they must put on their sirens with flashing blue lights on to be able to identify them. These are vehicles that are usually allowed to transit in pedestrian area zones. Altre categorie di veicoli, se espressamente consentito, ad esempio i veicoli ad emissioni zero. Other types of vehicles that might be allowed if it is indicated expressively accepted are vehicles that are zero emission to carbon dioxide. Okay, these are electric vehicles that might also be allowed in these areas. And now let's take a look at questions that we might find during our exams from this topic. Una zona a traffico limitato è un'area in cui può essere limitata la circolazione dei veicoli solo in alcune ore. We said that traffic limited areas, these are areas in which vehicles will not be allowed to transit in certain hours of the day. True, then it's vero. Una zona a traffico limitato è un'area nella quale può essere limitata la circolazione solo di particolari categorie di veicoli. Traffic limited zones are areas in which certain types of vehicles might not be allowed to transit in those areas. Vero. The third question. In una zona a traffico limitato possono circolare solo i veicoli autorizzati. In traffic limited areas, zones, only vehicles that are authorized might transit there. Yes, it's true. Vero. In una zona a traffico limitata è un'area nella quale può essere limitata la circolazione solo a particolari categorie di utenti. In a traffic limited zones, only certain particular categories of vehicles might be allowed to circulate in those areas. Vero. Una zona a traffico limitato è delimitata da appositi segnali stradali di inizio e di fine. In areas of traffic limited zones, areas, they would be identified with special road signals from the starting to the end. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare i veicoli ad emissione zero se espressamente consentito. In pedestrian areas, vehicles that are of zero emission might be allowed to transit if they are allowed in those areas. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare i pedoni. Pedestrian areas, pedestrians are allowed to transit. Vero. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare le biciclette. Yes, bicycles might be allowed to transit. True. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare i veicoli al servizio di persone diversamente abili. In pedestrian areas, vehicles that are at services of the people that are differently able might be allowed to transit. That is true. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare i veicoli della polizia con sirena a luce lampeggiante blu in funzione. In pedestrian areas, police vehicles are allowed to transit with blue flashing light on. That is true. The last question that is true that we might come across during exam. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare gli autoveicoli di vigili del fuoco con luce lampeggiante blu e sirena in funzione. Fire service vehicles are allowed to transit in pedestrian areas with blue flashing light and siren on. That is true. Now let's take a look at questions that are false that we might come across during exam. In una zona traffico limitato non possono entrare più di un certo numero di veicoli. This is confusing and it usually appears in exam. Okay, it says in a traffic limited zone, a certain number of vehicles are allowed to transit at a time. This is not true. Vehicles are allowed to transit. Certain number of vehicles are allowed to transit at a time. We said only certain type of vehicles are allowed, not number of vehicles. You don't count vehicles and say you can transit whilst the rest will wait. So this is false. The second one says una zona a traffico limitato è un'area nella quale è consentito solo il transito di ciclomotori e biciclette. Traffic limited areas zones are areas that allowed motorcycles and bicycles to transit. False. Una zona a traffico limitato è un'area sempre vietata al transito dei veicoli a motori. It says a traffic limited zone, these are areas that always forbid vehicles with engine to transit. That is false. Una zona a traffico limitato limita un'area limitato è un'area vietata al transito dei pedoni durante le ore notturne. It says a traffic limited zone is an area in which pedestrians are not allowed to transit in a certain hours of the day. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare tutti i motocicli, purché diano la precedenza ai pedoni. Or any kind of motorcycles are allowed to transit in traffic limited areas only if they will give rights for pedestrians to transit or to cross forth. This is false. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare i trattori stradali con velocità non superiore a 30 km/h. In pedestrian areas, tractors that that will usually be allowed to transit on road areas are allowed to transit in traffic limited in pedestrian zone areas if they did not go beyond 30 km/h. This is false. Nelle aree pedonali i ciclomotori possono transitare solo di giorno. In pedestrian areas, motorcycles are allowed to circulate in those areas only in the daytime. False. Nelle aree pedonali possono transitare tutti gli autoveicoli, ma con prudenza. This is also a question that will normally appear in your quiz. In pedestrian areas, vehicles or any kind of vehicle will be allowed to transit to circulate only if they give rights for pedestrians anytime they are willing to cross or while they are walking. No, we say certain types of vehicle that are at services of people that are differently able, firefighters and police vehicles. Those are the vehicles that will be allowed. The last question will be: nelle aree pedonali possono transitare i quadricicli a motori purché non superino la velocità di 50 km/h. In pedestrian areas, any kind of vehicle would be allowed to transit only if they don't go beyond 50 km/h, the speed. So this is also false. And I will leave you with this today until we meet again. Thank you. Have a blessed study. And I wish you all to pass this exam simply so that you will reach your goal of acquiring this license. Thank you so much. This is Dabojila Patente. Once again, I will remind you to subscribe to the channel and share, divulgate the voice as much as you can, so that we will have more people that will be following the channel, and this will give us more motivation to go ahead with the course. Thank you so much and have a nice day.